Whenever I finish a quilt top, I like to take the time to sew a victory lap around the entire perimeter of my quilt top, especially if it has a lot of seams at the edges like this one does. It's a simple and easy technique that's going to set you up for a big success when it comes to the quilting phase of your project. And if you send your quilt to a long armer, they are going to love you for this, I promise. In this short video, I'm going to be showing you the how and why of this simple technique. Let's get to it. So what is a victory lap anyways? Well, it's simply a line of stitches that goes around the entire perimeter of your quilt top. And personally, I do not consider my own quilt tops to be finished until I have sewn that victory lap. It's kind of like a reward. This is how I think about it, okay? So if you picture a runner who has won a race, they might continue running around the stadium after they finish in order to take a victory lap, right? It's like they just won, they're feeling great, woohoo, amazing, but they're not done yet. They're going to continue running around just to sort of celebrate their win. And that's what I think about for a victory lap. Usually by the time I'm done sewing the long seams that are the last seams in my quilt top, I kind of feel done with this project, right? Like you probably know what that feeling is like. Yay, last seam done. But I like to think of it as a reward. So I keep on sewing, I sew that victory lap around the outside. And when I think about it as a reward, it's more fun than if I think about it as a chore and something that I have to do. And FYI, victory lap is just like a made up term, right? You're not gonna find this in any kind of a quilting textbook. It's just something that I think I heard somebody say one time and I was like, oh, that's the perfect term for that. I love that. I'm going to use that from now on. So enjoy using that term from now on. You're welcome. So why bother sewing a victory lap other than it's fun? Well, if your quilt has a lot of seams at the edges, the more you handle it, the more chance there is that those stitches are actually going to start to come undone. So if you pull it out to measure it or to photograph it or to show to your friend or to look at the blocks again or whatever, the more you handle it, the more chances there are that those stitches are going to come unraveled. And that's bad for two reasons. Number one, it can affect the structural integrity of your quilt. So depending on how the blocks are pieced, it's possible that those stitches unraveling might unravel more stitches and then you might actually have your pieces starting to come apart, which is not what you want after you just spent all that time sewing this thing together. Number two, if you're sending this to a long arm quilter, it's possible that when the long arm quilter loads this on their machine and you haven't sewn a victory lap, that some of that fabric could kind of be flapping and the foot of their long arm machine might accidentally grab that fabric, flip it over, and then stitch it down on top of itself. And we really, really don't want that. Of course, if my quilt has borders on it, this is not necessary. You don't have to sew a victory lap if your quilt has got borders on it, because sewing on the borders is going to be the thing that's going to secure all of those little seams that are at the edges of your quilt. So once you sew a border on, you don't need to worry about these anymore. So if your quilt's got borders on it, hooray, that was your victory lap when you sewed those borders on. If you can sew a quilt top together, you can definitely sew a victory lap. All you have to do is take your quilt top and sew one single line of stitches that's approximately 1/8 of an inch away from the perimeter of your quilt top. And you do it that distance from the edge because you want it to be covered by the binding when you go to put it on. So if you sewed your victory lap and it was 3/4 of an inch in from the edge, you'd be able to see that line of stitching when your quilt was all finished, and you don't want that. I also like to change the stitch length when I'm sewing my victory lap. So normally when I'm piecing, my machine is set to a 2.0 stitch length, which on this machine means it's actually 2.0 millimeters in length. How logical. But when I'm sewing my victory lap, I like to click that down 2 clicks on my sewing machine, which then makes it 1.6 millimeters in length. And I find that the shorter stitches do a better job of securing my piecing stitching. So I find that just the shorter it is, the more secure those stitches are. When I come to a corner, I personally like to just pivot in the corner with my needle in the down position. But if you prefer, you could just stitch right off the edge of your quilt and then start a new line of stitching on the next edge that you start stitching on. However you do it, you're going to be doing your quilt and yourself a big favor. Wasn't that a fast and easy technique? It's not hard to do at all, and your future self will definitely thank you for it. I've been praising the virtues of a victory lap for a very long time, and I get a little thrill every time I see someone mention it on social media. Make sure that you tag me on Instagram at @matantquilting if you try this technique on your next quilt. And if you're looking for a sewing machine that's going to get you nice, accurate quilt blocks like I got with this quilt, you'll definitely want to check out my in-depth review of the Juki TL 2010Q, because this thing is a beast and I'm in love with it. And I think you might be too. As always, I'm wishing you happy sewing, and I'll see you in my next video.